welcome to the Portland Children's Levy Allocation Committee meeting for May 22nd, 2017. I'm City Commissioner and Allocation Chair Dan Saltzman, and with us today we have our fellow committee members. On my far right is Mitch Horniker, who represents the Portland Business Alliance. Next to me on my right is Julie S. Young, the city-appointed member. Multnomah County Chair Deborah Kafori, I'm sure will be arriving momentarily. And then on my far left is Serena Stoudemire Wesley, who is the Multnomah County citizen representative. I'll introduce the Levy staff now. We have Director Lisa Pellegrino, Assistant Director Meg McElroy, Lisa Hansel, Mary Gay Broderick, and John Kelly. And before we get started, let's approve the minutes from our May 1st meeting. Hopefully you all had a chance to look at them. And
I'll second.
okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve our May 1st meeting. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. And next on our agenda is we have time on our public agenda for people to talk to us about items that are not on the agenda. So anything that's on your mind that you may wish to talk to us about, this is that time. Is there anybody here who wishes to address us on non-agenda items today? We do have time set aside later on to talk about the agenda items for people to testify. So I'll see if there's any show of hands. I don't see anybody. Okay, we will move on. We'll begin by hearing a funding request to increase home visiting services for the Volunteers of America Family Relief Nursery. At our meeting on May 1st, we approved additional funding for 17 home visiting programs. At that time, Volunteer of America's Family Relief Nursery request was still pending, as staff was working with the grantee to gather sufficient information to make a final recommendation. Lisa Hansel is here to get us up to date on that matter before we vote.
Thank you. Staff has received the necessary information in order to make a recommendation.
Sorry, I was at display downstairs. I'm totally blaming Mary Gay Broderick. Mary Gay Broderick's her fault. She got me downstairs looking at the display, which is so wonderful. It's great.
Yeah.
Very happy.
Anyway, we're just
Sorry.
following up on
Yes.
the additional funding recommendations from last time, the Volunteers of America Family Relief Nursery issue.
Okay. So staff has received the necessary information in order to make a recommendation regarding VOA's request and has determined that the request meets the criteria of increasing direct service and supervisory staffing towards achieving the objectives of reducing caseloads, increasing the frequency of reflective supervision, and maintaining the number of children and families served comparable to fiscal year 16-17. Staff recommends that the VOA Family Relief Nursery be awarded $46,627. This two-year amount is reasonable and justified for the staffing patterns proposed by VOA and in comparison to all funding requests under this policy. The total funding recommended for the 18 home visiting programs, the 17 approved last time at May 1st, and this additional one totals $1,021,783 over 2 years.
Okay. Great. So any questions from the committee? So VOA's Family Relief Nursery has satisfied all
met
of the
the
information
criteria.
request? Okay.
Correct.
And you're recommending they be included in the rest of the home visiting programs for funding?
Yes.
Okay. I will entertain a motion if there's no questions to add the Volunteers of America to our home visiting list of programs to fund.
So moved. Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. So moving on, staff will now provide recommendations for funding options for the $1.9 million in additional accrued revenues, which is in addition to the $500,000 that we have slated for new after-school investments set to begin September 1st, and we'll be discussing that right after this item. So now we're ready to hopefully finalize our $1.9 million investment recommendations, and I'll turn it over to Lisa Pellegrino.
Right, so just to remember where we left off last time, this is essentially the money that you had allocated previously for current grantees to request additional funds, but was not actually requested. So you made your awards for expanded summer programming, you made your awards for increased home visiting programs and to support YPQA, and this was the unallocated balance that was left from that. So just so everyone's kind of clear on where that came from. So just also to remind us of kind of where we've been in discussing, so we've been discussing these additional accrued revenues and how you might allocate them for the last 9 months or so. And you decided to put $500,000 in the round for after-school funding, and you also considered other options at that time. So when this unallocated balance resurfaced, due to current grantees not requesting additional funding that would total those sums, we brought back to consider a few other things that you had considered previously for funding, as well as some recent developments. So one thing that came to our attention is the planned state budget cuts, because these proposed cuts, of course, you never know which cuts will actually happen. We understand that, but they are in the offing still, since no decisions have been made and no budget has yet been passed. We were alerted to think of these in part because they're thinking of cutting the employment-related daycare subsidy potentially, and that is something that we build on in our child care initiative subsidy funding. We typically build on the ERDC subsidy as well. So if those funds are cut, that might affect families who are currently taking advantage of CCI. In addition, there's potential cuts to relief nurseries, healthy families, preschool promise, and a few other programs that are would potentially affect current grantees of the levy. So staff is recommending that the committee think about possibly holding some funding over until their July 24th meeting, because at that point the state budget should be finalized. We would expect anyway that it would be finalized by then, since usually they're doing it to start the new fiscal year on July 1st. So then we might have a better sense for how it's affecting our current grantees and the other things that we fund. The other thing we thought was worth thinking about, which you all entertained previously as well, was in general increasing funding for the child care initiative. At the time that we were first discussing these accrued revenues, all the slots were not yet used for CCI. We're approaching the end of another fiscal year now, because a lot of time has gone on, and I think it might be worth reassessing. So they're going to be finishing their fiscal year before your next meeting on July 24th, so we'll have a better understanding of the slot usage and potential, whether we want to just potentially fund that at a higher level, for two possible reasons. One, because the RDC might be cut, and one, just because there might be enough demand. So that's the other thing we thought ought to be considered based on what you all had exhibited preference for when we discussed this 9 months earlier. We also raised the issue of additional early childhood investments, which some of you were interested in a while back. In 2015, you increased funding for Head Start slots, which are preschool slots for 3 and 4-year-olds typically. Do I have that right? Yes. 3 and 4, yes. And you did raise funding for that. We did not increase funding for center-based early Head Start, which is for younger children, and it's caring for them in a center-based. We do fund also home visiting-based early Head Start. This would be for a center-based Head Start. So no funding was put toward increasing that. That would increase early childhood investments, which, there's pros and cons to those things. But some of you were interested in that, so we thought that might be worth thinking about in this context. And then last, some of you were interested in potentially increasing the funding in after-school that you're currently about to consider. And that's part of the reason we thought it made sense to decide this first, because it would help you figure out how many applicants you should ask back based on how much money you think you want to allocate to that purpose. So, staff has some caution for you all in that, in terms of how many applicants get asked back, just because of this is a pretty time-compressed round, and we have to get the applications reviewed including the July 4th holiday, of which there's not always a lot of people to find. So we want to make sure we have a quality process with adequate time for reviewers to read and score and discuss these applications. So, we have some hesitation about making that quite a bit larger than was originally contemplated. And also just for the fact that some of the facts that the committee raised and previously about being hesitant to do new grant rounds, of ending up with lots of new grants where there's only 2 years left on the current funding authorization. And also they have to get up and running pretty fast, because this funding round is coming to an end fairly quickly, or has to start up very quickly, because the grants will start September 1 after school. Programming typically starts in September, so it doesn't give people much chance to kind of get their act together. And for us to support them in creating the parameters for their grant agreement as well. So that's sort of the cautions in that. And as I said, I think it would be helpful if people came to some level of decision about this, because it would help frame your discussion about how many applicants you want to ask to submit full applications. And also typically when we put out the RFI, which is the request for investment, that is the full funding application that we ask for. We typically say how much money we're giving away and to what strategies you are thinking you want to put that money, ideally. Now, not that you necessarily always follow that, but you have at least a guideline. So we would be looking to be able to put some amounts in in that RFI when we publish. We'd like to publish later this week to give people enough time to write the application before we have to bring their reviewers in. So that's kind of the headset. There's questions and discussion. I think Dan probably helped lead you through too. Go ahead, Julie. You look like you have a question.
Go ahead, Jill.
No,
Okay.
I'm fine, thanks.
So we're going to take testimony now on the proposed slate of the additional funding recommendations.
I'm not sure I would call them recommendations so much as we comprise them as options for you all to consider. We didn't necessarily put them in an order in which we were saying, dear board, please consider them in this order for these reasons. We sort of suggested that they are options for you all to consider, and we would help facilitate you through the process of arriving at a decision around how you want to proceed. And yes, I think having an opportunity for testimony might help you in that.
And just to be clear, so the after-school round that we'll be talking about in a few minutes, the goal is to bring that back to the allocation committee for its July 24th meeting to make
The final decisions
Make-
so that we can quickly write the grants and get them up and rolling by September 1.
Okay,
So we don't have much option to push that deadline out further.
right. Well, I would just say that, I do support, I think it's prudent for us to retain the 1.9 million that we haven't invested at this point until after the legislative session is over, until we do have a better idea of how it may affect the child care initiative, early Head Start programs, some of the other programs that we fund that may be impacted by whatever decisions the legislature makes with respect to funding for these key strategies. So I sent you all a memo last week that just articulated that I really think it'd be prudent for us to wait until July 24th before we obligate anything of that 1.9 million unexpended balance. So that's my 2 cents worth on that. So now we'll see if anybody wishes to testify on the proposed slate of investments that we are about to vote on.
Or it's options, really. It's just options, I guess.
Oh, okay.
It's not really a slate.
Yeah, I wouldn't conceive of it as a slate because you haven't really formulated which things you want to do or not, other than the preference you just voiced.
Okay.
So in other words, after this testimony, someone will have to conceive of a motion to
Okay.
proceed.
I'll just kind of say what my thoughts are at this point, and then I'm interested to hear public comments. I appreciate
You have to push
your,
Are you on?
no.
Oh, you are on. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yep.
you're on.
I appreciate your point, and I know that in the county's budget this year, we have set aside some dollars because of the just uncertainty of what's happening at, state and federal level. I do think, though, the amount of money that we have in this pot is large enough that we could put half away for after July 24th and still add half. I was, to this current proposal of looking at these after-school summer programs, I just was really impressed with all of the applications that came in, the letters of intent, I should say, and thought that there were some really exciting programs, and I would, I want to fund them, so I would suggest that as an alternative to putting it all away to put half.
Put halfway, okay. Any other?
My
Committee members? Yeah.
inclination would be to be cautious, I guess, more cautious than probably Commissioner Kafori would be. And I agree with Commissioner Salzman that I think we really have an opportunity here to wait a little while before we make a decision on those additional dollars. I would be willing to consider some amount to perhaps fund an additional 2 after-school programs, maybe up to an additional $200,000. But I think that I would be much more comfortable preserving as much of this 1.9 as we can come to an agreement on.
Okay. Okay, well, great. Now, let's see if anybody wants to help advise us on that. Do we have anybody? I see some people, hands up. Sir, come on up. There's three chairs there, and I see 3 people, or 4 people, actually. Thank you.
Why, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Well,
My name
welcome.
is Chuck Smith, and I'm the program director at the Black Parent Initiative. And with me today is Liana Haywood from the Moore Institute at Oregon Health Science University. And I wanted to just share some information about some possibilities for how you might use funding for this additional allocation. And before you have a document that's called Pre-Pregnancy Through the First 1,000 Days, a Culturally Specific Holistic Intervention Continuum Model. I just want to highlight a few points. BPI is a culturally specific program, and we've taken the approach of trying to address the root causes of poor health outcomes for children and families, starting with nutrition and also dealing with toxic stress in people's lives. So in the document that you have on page 2 outlines the range of services that we have designed through partnership with others and direct service ourselves to comprehensively address at a community level nutrition issues as well as social stress, and then the individualized supports that people may need to not only have a healthy baby but also to have a healthy beginning. So we pick up before pregnancy, building on community foundations and good nutrition, moving through to community baby showers and doula services, culturally specific community-based doula services, and then home visiting programs for families of young children, focusing on attachment, good connection, and healthy birth continuation, and then moving into engaging people into their own process of healthy eating through gardening, culturally specific agriculture, and then providing support to families from an educational standpoint to ensure that families have the best information to be optimally healthy, and wrapping that around with the idea of community mentors, which actually get engaged at the point of community baby showers to connect young families with elder adults to provide that social support that makes a difference. And Liana would like to read a letter from the Moore Institute and Dr. Thornburg.
I'm here representing Dr. Kent Thornburg, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, but I have a letter from him to read. So African Americans suffer from more hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease than does any other ethnic group. Diabetes prevalence is 3 times higher for African Americans than for Caucasians. There's now clear evidence that these diseases originate during fetal development and infancy. People who are born at the light end of the birth weight scale are 3 to 5 times more likely to suffer the ravages of disease. Babies born to African American women have lower birth weights on average than other groups. This predisposes them to have early onset chronic disease. Low birth weight offspring are more likely to put on excess weight as children. The Black Parent Initiative is unique because it provides education and support to both mothers and fathers during pregnancy and in the early life of the child. This is the most crucial period in the developing person's life to prevent disease through a good diet and a low-stress environment. BPI is providing an opportunity to help young couples learn about the importance of exercise and a nutritious diet during pregnancy and early childhood. In addition, the social support these families will receive through BPI reduces toxic stress, leading to stronger families and healthier offspring. The OHSU Moore Institute offers high praise to Charles McGee and his amazing staff at the Black Parent Initiative for their vision in reversing the detrimental social outcomes usually found among Black couples. We are seeking ways to join forces to offer nutrition education and to assist in finding financial support for one of Portland's greatest social programs. Together, the Moore Institute and the Black Parent Initiative can go a long way toward eradicating chronic disease that arises from early development. In the past 20 years, the prevalence of diabetes has tripled and the prevalence of obesity has doubled in Oregon. Now some 2/3 of Oregonians are obese or overweight. This disease epidemic will continue unabated until we finally decide that it has to stop. The Black Parent Initiative is making a significant difference in the lives of young African American couples. The Moore Institute strongly supports their efforts, and we urge the Levy to help them develop and expand their program for the vulnerable parents and their babies.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right.
So if you can just give us your name and organization if you wish, and then you have up to 3 minutes each.
Thanks.
Start with
My
you.
name's Allison Dunphy. I work for Pathfinders of Oregon. I'm the director of our community programs. And Pathfinders is a current grantee under the Levy for child abuse prevention and intervention. We provide parenting services and early childhood home visiting through that grant. And we applied for after-school enrichment funding and received a pretty high score, but didn't get recommended for submitting a full application. So I just wanted to give you some more information before you make your decision about who to fund. And the information I'm sharing is here on this paper, so you can follow along. We serve primarily families that are impacted by parental incarceration, and children whose parents are involved in the criminal justice system are an invisible and, as a result, underserved population. Parental incarceration really increases risk for these children, including poverty, household instability, and the increased likelihood of experiencing adverse childhood experiences. Based on a Child Trends report from Parents Behind Bars, these kiddos also struggle in school. Children with justice-involved parents are more likely to have school problems than children without parents involved in the system. They're more likely to repeat a grade, and they may have more problem behaviors in school that require the school contacting the adult in the household to discuss those behavior problems. And additionally, children with justice-involved parents also have lower school engagement, so that means less interest in learning new things at school. They're doing less homework, and they're less interested in doing well in school. So we really want to support these kiddos with some after-school programming. And we have the unique ability to be able to leverage our existing programs, which include parenting classes that we can offer parents at the school as part of the Sun Extended Day. And we also have a youth mentoring program that's funded by the Youth Development Council, where we can provide one-on-one mentoring for these kids in addition to the after-school activities. And we think that our program is a really good fit for this recent round of applications, because all of the youth that we're serving are low income, and approximately 90% are children of color. And additionally, that's it. So just wanted to give you that additional information, and my coworker is here to discuss our program a little bit more.
Hi, my name is Brittany Wilson, and I'm the coordinator for the Mentoring Inside Out program. Mentoring Inside Out, or MIO, we serve youth 7 to 14 whose families have been impacted by the criminal justice system. Our mission is to help these youth succeed and fulfill their potential both academically and professionally. Having the opportunity to host after-school programming catered to the specific population enables numerous benefits. An after-school program offers consistency and structure, which many of these youth are missing. It enables the youth to be surrounded by others in similar situations, which in turn can lessen the stigma and isolation of having a parent that's incarcerated. It promotes school engagement and better and more positive relationships with peers, caregivers, and teachers. Having someone there to help with your homework, answer your questions, provide positive strength-based feedback, and just a shoulder to lean on is crucial to the success of a lot of these youth. To me, the best part of this program is the fun piece. Having a parent that's incarcerated, a lot of times you're forced to grow up a little too quickly and not experience, a quote-unquote, a normal childhood. So this program, while giving these children the opportunity to grow academically, socially, also gives them the opportunity to have a good time, to just be a kid for a few hours, and that's important also. Growing up, both of my parents were incarcerated numerous times. Growing up, I never heard of programs like this that were catered specifically to people going through my situations. I didn't have a lot of positive, consistent adults in my life, and I feel that consistency and dependability is crucial to someone who doesn't have that for their development. Had a program like this been around during my childhood, I feel it would have benefited me greatly. I feel that I would have had a better self-esteem, more positive self-image, better relationships with peers and caregivers, and more success in my academic career. I believe this program has unlimited potential to help youth cope with the everyday struggles they face while their parent or parents are absent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. So you kind of jumped ahead a little bit on our agenda, but that's fine.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. But before we move on to sort of the formal consideration of the letters of intent we received and which ones we want to choose to develop full-blown proposals, I would really like us to come to some agreement about the 1.9 million unallocated fund balance and what we want to do with that before we move on to that item. So Chair Kafori has suggested we take about half of that and set it into the next item, the request for investments. Julie Young has suggested we do about 200,000 of that 1.9 million into the after-school fund. Are there other perspectives? As I said, my preference would be to keep it all till July 24th, but I think it'd be useful if we came to some consensus on position before we move on to the next item.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, so other thoughts?
If we think of Julie's proposal as kind of a compromise, then I would support that.
Okay. Serena?
I was gonna go with the half, because I thought 50% is more of a compromise. Kind of cut it in half, and so that's right.
Cut which number in half, Serena?
I think the 1.9 is what we're talking about, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the 1.9.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, what
Yeah, that's.
Chair Kafori
Chair
had proposed
Kafori.
too. Okay.
Okay. Well, we need to probably have a motion, and
What was the amount that we did not allocate for the home visiting programs that,
It's now about 1.85 because you just allocated about 50,000 for,
Just home visiting specifically? Is that what you're asking?
well, I thought that we, was it 1.9, or I guess it was 1.8, but it was because we had fewer requests, is that correct?
For both home visiting and for the summer,
And the summer, that was it.
the summer and after school, yeah.
Okay,
the bulk was from lack of summer proposals for expansion, sorry.
right. And do we have, are there other funds also that we had chosen to hold back and not allocate? I mean, in other words, is there another?
Well, there is the projection of future revenues when we did, because originally when we had the conversations about having the additional dollars, I'm not as good at this as probably John is. There was a projection of the levy is projected to, over the next 2 years, to bring in more money. Obviously, we don't have it, but that was the projection. Is that correct?
Right, the money we've talked about, the 2.4 that is now 500,000 for already after school, 1.9 that they're talking about, that's the already accrued revenue. There's money coming in going forward, but that's
Okay.
not in this pot that we're
Right.
talking
Okay.
about.
so we're talking about the same numbers.
We are,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that's, I want to
And
clarify that.
Nothing has changed in the sense, I mean, I think they're helpful to keep in the container for the discussion. This is the same amount of funding that we were talking about last July into August into the fall, right? So it's that 4.4 of the accrued revenue. So this is in the bank account now, as opposed to money that might come in down the line, which happens, each year that we collect
So if we
revenues.
were to do half, and if, whatever the legislature's gonna do, and we're really trying to hold back some for the ERDC because because that's really one of the bigger programs that are looking at some cuts, am I correct? Or,
That's what we've been told. I mean, you know more than I do, Serena, I'm sure.
yeah, right. I think we're all kind of in a holding pattern. So that money is what we're talking about holding that would really help the ERDC.
I think
state?
Yeah, it could.
Or is that
ERDC
one of just?
or other things
okay.
that are affected by significant state cuts. I mean, I think that's the other side of it, is sort of
We don't know.
how it finally all shakes out is yet to be seen. But
That could be
ERDC seems.
Relief nurseries.
Relief nurseries, preschool promise are some of the bigger ones that were proposed for cuts. There's also going to be programming, I suspect, in DHS-related child welfare that are abuse prevention programs and neglect prevention programs that could be affected.
Mind you, we're specifically talking about our grantees that we're already funding. So I'm talking about services. I mean, there's going to be a broad effect to many actors in the system that will affect the kids that are served, but we were specifically thinking of our grantees.
And the only other thing I would add to that is, I mean, I guess because we go through this every year at Multnomah County, because we've pretty much always in a cut situation and looking at the legislature whose decisions come after we make our decisions, so it's kind of a familiar place to be in, is that looking to fund programs that are being cut by the legislature is dicey. I mean, it's important, but unless we're willing to take these on in perpetuity as our programs, or to fill this gap in perpetuity, then we might think about, the changing winds of the way funding goes. Sometimes you get funding for this, and so I know in the county budget, we labeled it as federal state ramp down, because we obviously don't want to take on all the responsibilities that the the state has been paying for at the local level. So there's just neither here nor there, except just to let you know how we think about things.
I mean, if the levy is renewed and you consider another round of competitive funding, you'll have to consider it then, because the grants would be what the grants are, and people are typically coming in and asking to keep their money. So that's true.
Right.
Well, I think there's two people that say we should increase the after-school funding round by 200,000. Two people saying we should increase it by about $1 million.
900, yeah.
900,000, $1 million. I am sort of for keeping it all for a later date, but I will, in the interest of trying to reach a compromise, I would support taking 300,000 out of the 1.9 million and putting it into the after-school round that we're going to do right now. If somebody wants to make that into a motion,
Well, I have a question. So the after-school will just be for the intensive as well as the enrichment programs? So that means
yeah.
we'd have to, for those folks who just did all this hard work, hoping to have something for their programs to go forward with, would have to wait even longer, because then we would be rushing to get things done. Am I correct? Or it would be,
This wouldn't change the timeline. It would just increase, no, we would just, if you all decide to increase the amount of money that's available to give out in this round, then you'll make the decision to allocate that amount of funding while holding back the remainder to see if and what you might want to do when you find out more information.
would it reduce the
wouldn't change
number
the
of
timing.
new programs that we would possibly be considering?
If you put more money into this after-school round, I don't see how it would decrease the number of new programs. It looks like it would increase the number of new programs because you, go
But
ahead.
not as many programs would be able to receive the funds, is what I'm saying. So like maybe looking at the amount that programs have asked for, if we said additional $300,000, so maybe it'd only be like maybe 2 to 4 programs that we would be getting funding to instead of.
I think I understand what you're asking. If we put 300 in versus 900, there will be fewer.
Right,
Yes.
programs to consider.
Yes.
Exactly. But if we put 300 more than the original 500, it'll be more.
Well, I'll
You know,
make it, I move that, that there be an additional $300,000 allocated for new after-school programs.
okay, been moved. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
All right.
Okay, it's decided. We'll take $300,000 of that 1.9 million and put it into our next agenda item, enrich the pot there from 500,000 that we plan to invest in after-school programs to 800,000.
800,000, exactly.
When you
So
talk about strategies.
And can somebody remind me, did we have a split between academic and enrichment? What were the numbers?
you had originally planned to put 60% of the 500 into intensive academic supports and 40% into enrichment programming. you could keep that. I mean, in the draft RFI, which is sort of the last item on the agenda, after you make these set of decisions, I have left blank the amount of money that you would be targeting to try to invest in one category versus another, figuring that you would want to decide that today, because I don't know whether you want to change that. You had originally said 60/40. If you don't want that split and you want to set a different target, you could talk about that now, and then that way I could include it. It just helps people understand what the likely, kind of what the base of the competition is. Does that make sense? Because they know, they have a sense.
What was the 60/40 split again? What was the 60?
Intensive academic was 60% and enrichment was 40%.
I would propose switching, flopping them, just because, or there are so many more programs in the enrichment than in the academic.
Last time, just if this is helpful, when you allocated funding in the last 2014 round, I think you had 60/40 was your goal again, but you were more like, you ended up with about 52/48 intensive academic versus enrichment. So you were closer to half-half in terms of your actual allocations.
Because now we have 800, correct?
Yes, right.
All right, who's math? What's 800, 60/40?
480 for 60% and 320 for 40%, correct? Thanks, John.
Yeah, I personally would rather see us split, because there are so many more applications on
Or
the enrichment. Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay,
I would second that.
okay. Moved and seconded to allocate of the $800,000 we're about to make some preliminary decisions on. 480,000 of that would go towards the after-school enrichment category, and the remaining 320,000 would be used for the intensive academic category. So that's the
And also
motion.
to clarify, is that just a goal? I mean, we're going to try
Yes.
to get close, because the programs aren't going to match up necessarily.
Right.
so-
Right.
Okay.
What has sometimes happened before is that when you're allocating the funds, people look at what their top priorities are, and then sometimes at the end, they want to move something over because they had another priority surfaces, or they hear testimony that persuades them, or something happens to change how people feel about it in the moment. So I think you could still preserve that right, but at least it gives people some general idea of what you're shooting for, which just feels like a little more transparent, so people understand what the pot of funds they're going for is.
Okay. Well, the motion has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's passed. And now we will actually move on to that next item that we've been anticipating so much, and that is to choose which organizations we will ask to submit a full request for information for the after-school funding round. As you recall, we're operating this funding round a bit differently than past ones. Earlier this spring, the Levy staff put out a call for letters of interest, which are typically about 2 to 3 pages, and we received 23 responses. A committee of reviewers scored the letters, and from these, we will choose which organizations we want to submit full request for informations. And staff will provide some background. I think we've pretty much covered this, but if you have more you want to add. And then we'll open the floor for public comment, and then we'll hopefully make some decisions. Did you want to add anything, Meg?
The only thing I wanted to add was that well, two things. We haven't typically done a two-step process before, so this is new for us. And the other thing that was a little bit different this time on account of the two-step process is that the community reviewers that we recruited, and there were 5 of them, were able to score all of the letters of interest. So typically, because of the volume of reading of applications and the task that we ask people to do, we have small groups of reviewers who are reviewing subsections, sort of a group of proposals within the entire program area. So for example, in our last grant making, we might have gotten 20 applications in after school, and a group of 5 reviewers would have reviewed only 5 and scored only 5 of those applications. Another set of reviewers would have done another 5. So in that case, reviewers didn't have the advantage of seeing every single application submitted, so they can't consider which ones score highly for them or are compelling for them, and give you all recommendations. In this go-around, because the reviewers read every single letter and scored them all, we facilitated them through a process of generating recommendations. So typically staff has done that in the past because we have the advantage of seeing them all and seeing the scores and considering things. But this time we asked the reviewers if they would be interested and willing to do it, and they were. So the recommendation lists are what the reviewers arrived at in terms of their recommendations. And again, they're recommendations, they're things for your consideration. And so from there, we can begin the conversation. My plan was to,
Wait, just a sec, did I hear you say you wanted to do testimony first before you start talking about what your slate is or what your preferences are? Am I correct, or did I hear you wrong? I just want to check.
That's what I thought we would do, but
Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, you can do it either way. You can do it twice if you want, but, because I did hear him say he wanted to take testimony first.
do we want to discuss our slates first and then take testimony? I think we should,
can I give a little
do testimony.
transparent introduction to what you're talking about in terms of the order of things, so that people in the audience know how you all kind of looked at
I also
everything?
wanted to have you read into the record the organizations that applied under each
Sure.
heading.
Okay.
Just so our audience, our listening audience also knows what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. So I will start with intensive academic, but before I read off the names of the applicants and the programs that they applied to have invited back, I just want to say that we gave each allocation committee member all of the letters of interest that were submitted. After the reviewers completed their work, the allocation committee members received all of the scores of each of the letters. And then we asked each allocation committee member to individually send us their priorities or preferences for which letters to invite back for full applications. Using their individual preferences, we then put together a spreadsheet internally for staff to understand what number of allocation committee members had a preference for the letters to be invited back. And I'll use that to organize our conversation today. First, I'll just read all of the applicants in intensive academic. And I am going in score order. So I think the folks who are here with us today, they have a yellow piece of paper that should have these applicants on it. So the highest scoring was El Programa Hispano Católico for Puentes Primaria. The second, Latino Network for K-3 Success for Latino students. Boys and Girls Clubs for the Russell Elementary Program, however, they withdrew that application. REAP Incorporated for the Reflections Program. Impact Northwest for intensive academic support at 5 schools. Metropolitan Family Service for Experience Corps. Friendly House Incorporated for Project Return, and Portland Tennis and Education for their Portland Tennis and Education program. So do you want me to?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and read the enrichment applicants?
Sure,
too.
okay. So on the orange piece of paper that folks in the audience have, applicants for enrichment programs and funding, and again, these are in score order. Young audiences for creativity after school class. Boys and Girls Clubs for East Portland Youth and Family Service Program. Community Cycling Center, East Portland Bike Club. Bravo Youth Orchestra, Roosevelt Cluster After School Ensembles. Human Solutions Family Center Enrichment Program. Pathfinders of Oregon Play and Learn Kids Club. Kairos PDX Learning Academy. Airway Science for Kids Take Flight, East Portland Expansion. Oregon Zoo Foundation, Zoo Animal Presenters. Chess for Success, Athletics of the Mind, Athletics for the Mind. Children's Book Bank, East Portland Book Blitz. Volunteers of America Youth Prevention Services. Big Brothers Big Sisters, Bigs in Blue. The Children's Course First Tee Life Skills Experience, and Salvation Army After School Program.
Okay, great.
And so do you want testimony by strategy first, or do you want me to review the way in which your preferences penciled out? Which would
Yeah,
you?
why don't you, while you're at it, go ahead and review the way our preferences,
Okay, so that
as
folks,
we provided to you individually, and then.
yep,
you're
so that
gonna-
folks can follow along and understand kind of where you were as you walked into this meeting.
I
Go
want to
ahead.
make something clear, though, for those in our, here. I just wrote them down. I didn't actually rank them in order.
Ah, okay.
So,
It doesn't really end up,
Mine didn't,
Yeah.
okay.
do mine
okay.
it doesn't really end up mattering, because all we did was count the number of people who were interested in funding a
Yep.
program, and then we wrote that number in the column. And all that does is just order the discussion. It doesn't mean that any of you can't bring up any program you're interested in funding and raise it for discussion. It's just, it helps frame the order of discussion so you understand where your general agreement is, and then areas where you might want to advocate for something that you're particularly interested in yourself.
Okay, so if we're looking at the intensive academics, which is the yellow sheet for folks in the audience, there were 4 allocation committee members who had on their preference list Latino Network. So I'm going to go, as I walk you through this, it's going to be the most number of allocation committee members who supported an application ordered by score. So I'm going to start with things for which there was a high score and most number. So there were 4 allocation committee members with a preference for Latino Network, K through 3 success for Latino students. There were 3 allocation committee members with a preference for REAP Incorporated Reflections Program. There were 2 allocation committee members with a preference for El Programa Hispanos Puentes per Maria program. And then the following each had 1 allocation committee member with a preference for it. Impact Northwest Intensive Academic Support, Metropolitan Family Service Experience Corps, and Friendly House Project Return. Do you want me to do the same thing now for enrichment?
Yeah, I wanted to do the same thing for the enrichment programs.
So back to that orange sheet. And this one jumps around a little bit, so bear with me. So there were 4 allocation committee members with a preference for Boys and Girls Club, East Portland Youth, and Family Service Program. And I'm going in score order and number of members with preference. So the next one, there were 4 allocation committee members with a preference for Bravo Youth Orchestra. And there were 4 allocation committee members with a preference for Kairos PDX Learning Academy. Going back up to the top now, there were 3 allocation committee members with a preference for Young Audience Creativity After School class. 3 members with a preference for Community Cycling Center. 3 for a preference for Human Solutions Family Center Enrichment Program. And then there was 1 allocation committee member with a preference for Pathfinders of Oregon Play and Learn Kids Club.
Okay.
Is this where we get to tease Mitch?
I was just trying to do the math. Mitch, did you have a chance to provide input? 'Cause-
I just saw the text today, so I was reading the meeting, so.
Okay. That's all, that's fine.
Mitch is going to have to give his preferences on the fly.
Okay. Okay, well, so now we're at the point of asking for testimony. I think
Can-
people in the audience have an idea where we're coming from, and
Can I ask one question first?
Sure,
On
sure.
El Programa, because you had sent out a message saying that their programs, parts of their program was out of the city of Portland.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
Can you
think that the
elaborate?
committee needs to, if they want to have this application back, they'll need to face what you want your policy to be. In the past, we have generally discouraged people who are offering a school-based program where the school is not within the boundaries of the city of Portland from applying for funding at a school-based site, because there isn't always a means in which to screen people out, because kids don't necessarily you don't do an intake on a child like you might in many other programs where people are able to screen. It's sometimes more difficult. So I just think that, the committee shouldn't make it known what you want your policy to be, because in the past, we have typically not done that. If you want to fund it, we still need to make sure we're serving City of Portland children with the initiative, which is stated in the LOI. I mean, that is part of what our typical requirements are. And so they would need some way to ascertain that, if they're going to make sure that the kids are coming, that they live in the city, since they're not technically going to school. The way we work it is either you live or you go to school in the city, because some kids do attend in the city but live outside the boundary. So if they're coming to a school-based program that we're paying for in the city, you can attend either way. But since the school is located outside the city, they would need to be doing some kind of a check to make sure that we're serving children who are Portland residents.
And we've never done that before with a school-based after-school program, is what you're saying.
Not with a school-based after-school program.
Just
remembering
curious.
wrong?
I think there was a Sun School many years back at Alder or Davis where we had to
Did we do that one year?
kind of make some exceptions, but there was, I think,
So 1 year.
a 21st Century Learning Center grant that phased out, and for a short period of time, we provided bridge
Provided some
funding.
Bridge funding for that, we did, that's true. So
Was
there
this organization, were they aware that this is a challenge, or when this was submitted?
I mean,
They didn't ask any questions ahead of time, and so the first that we learned of it was when we received the LOI. It is stated in the LOI that you must serve residents of the city of Portland or children who, in the city of Portland, go to school or reside in the city of Portland.
Well, I have a hunch we'll get testimony on this.
It can be confusing sometimes, because I know there are Beaverton residents that have the city of Portland as their, so, you know, I can see how that would.
And I think a couple of years ago, there was a Human Solutions had wanted to do a school that was outside of the city limits, and we chose not to. So I just wanted to make sure that that.
It's just harder for people, just from what I've understood from going, it's just not as easy when you're a school-based program, because people perceive that if the program is in the school, then I should be able to go to it. So there has to be some way to deal with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we're being fair, because if we had told Human Solutions
Yes.
prior, then we're not doing something different, so that it's an equal playing field.
the policy up to today has been that schools that are located outside of the city boundary are not eligible for the services that are typically provided. So.
Okay, so we'll have to wrestle with that policy.
Yes, you're going to have to
Perhaps.
wrestle with that.
But before you guys go, can we just reground ourselves? I think we, if I understood our fractionalization of the new money, did we just add 120,000 of the 300,000 to intensive academic?
The total numbers were, so yes, 320 to, do I have that right? 320 is 40% of the 800?
120 would be,
Did we
I
have
thought we reversed the numbers, so
we-
intensive academic got 40% of the new 300.
Of the 800
Wasn't
total.
of the total 800?
It was of the total
So
800.
we, that's why I was asking the question. So we basically put all the money in a pot and then re-changed the percentages. So could we
Yes.
just, I just want to be clear, how much do we have to spend in intensive academic?
320 if you stick with your,
Yeah.
allocation that you just said you wanted your target to be. So that would be 320 for intensive academic and 480 for enrichment.
480. Great.
Okay. Any further questions before we start testimony? Okay, great, thank you. So now we are at the point where we'll take public testimony. And again, the question before us is to choose which letters of investment that we received, and we just talked about, the various organizations, which ones we invite to give us full-blown proposals that we would then make a decision on at our July 24th meeting. So that's our topic, and I see a couple people queuing up here. Come on up, grab a chair, grab a microphone, and if you can just give us your name and organization, and then you each have up to 3 minutes.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Commissioner Rojas, Executive Director of El Programa Hispano-Católico. So thank you for initiating the conversation. I did want to offer a piece of clarification. Wilkes is in the city of Portland. Zip code is 97230, and if you look at the address online, it's the city of Portland address. One of the concerns, I think, that is valid for you as a committee is that the population of the school is split up between, it's a boundary, right? So it's right.
I don't think your microphone is on.
Oh,
You're
yeah,
getting all
sorry.
kinds of crazy.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, that's
There you
better.
go.
Sorry about that.
Do I need to say any of that again? Did y'all hear me? Okay, good. And I think that's kind of loud now.
Start over.
Oh, okay. So, thank you for bringing up the conversation around City of Portland versus not City of Portland funding or funding projects that are in or outside of the city boundaries. And I wanted to offer a clarification for El Programa Hispano-Católico's proposal, Puentes Primaria, which is Wilkes is in the city of Portland. So it's 97230 ZIP, and I was aware of the committee's desire to only fund the city of Portland and beyond that, residents of Portland. And we are a current recipient of Children Levy funding for child abuse prevention and intervention. So I did do my due diligence before that to make sure that it would qualify or be something that would be considered. Beyond that, it is a majority Latino school. And it's a high barrier site. It's significantly underfunded. And I would like to raise that as something to consider for the council, for you as a committee, is that a lot of times boundary schools get underfunded because there's this kind of funding question of who funds, whose responsibility does this lie in, which jurisdiction does it lie in? And so a lot of times, these schools which end up having high barriers, particularly Wilkes, has a lot of transportation barriers, service barriers, and again, it is a majority Latino school. So I think it offers a unique opportunity for you as the committee to fund this site, given that it is a majority Latino school that has been historically underfunded. Beyond that, another consideration is mobility of families. So we have been seeing this, and I think this is a bigger question for you as a council, but we do know that with the housing crisis and increased displacement, that boundaries of cities is blurry, especially when you have a school. So one of my thoughts was that the school is in the city of Portland. I would encourage the council to consider that so long as the students are in the school, that they should qualify to be served, especially because there is a lot of movement back and forth, and we don't want to end up terminating services to a family that we started in the city of Portland that perhaps halfway through the school year moves into the Gresham boundary, but the school is still, they still remain at the school, right? So it's something that's food for thought. But, you know, if you did decide that you don't want to open it up to students of the, you know, the entire population, and we would be focusing on serving mostly Latino youth, is that we currently have systems, we're Sun lead at that site, we're also a P3 lead at that site, and we do intakes that look at the residents of the students, so we have a mechanism to be able to identify youth that are from the city of Portland.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Sir?
Hi, my name is Seth Truby. I'm the Executive Director of Bravo Youth Orchestras. You guys have already been very patient about receiving testimony from us at earlier meetings, so I'm not going to trumpet our students' musical successes. You saw what I did there. So I just wanted to bring up one interesting point. If you look at the recommended programs, we are the only one that actually listed on this part of the application the number of students we expect to serve. Now, the reason I think that's significant is we are taking a very different approach. This year, we're serving 4 schools in the Roosevelt cluster. Next year, we'll be serving 5 schools with about 175 kids in after-school programs. That's a relatively small number. We go really deep with these kids. And one of the things I'm really excited to be able to share with you, it's hot off the presses. We just got our first evaluation results. I'll be leaving this with the staff. And I hope if we're invited to submit a full application that we can highlight some of the very exciting findings. We're using PPS data through a data sharing agreement with Portland Public Schools and analyzing Bravo students against non-Bravo students in the same grades and schools that we're serving. Our students have significantly better attendance. Their assessment scores are higher in both math and in language arts. In fact, in language arts, it's as if they had a whole extra year of school. They're moving from 30th percentile to the 40th percentile, and that's just with music. We're not doing any tutoring. And then my favorite statistic, of 36 suspensions last year in the schools and grades we served, only 1 was a Bravo student. So I hope we have a chance to share the full findings with you if we're invited to submit a full application. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Hello, my name is Claire Rochelle. I work with Volunteers of America, Oregon. I wanted to just kind of speak on behalf of the Youth Prevention Services application. I wanted to give you a little more information if I was able to at this point. I see that the number of children served annually was not specified. We serve approximately 275 youth a year at 5 home-forward low-income housing sites. About 90% of those are children of color. Most of the sites, 3 of the 5 sites that we serve currently, 4 of them are in East Portland. And I just wanted to give that clarification and let you know that while we support a lot of the other programs that are running, a lot of our kids attend things like Sun and after-school programs in their schools because they do they qualify for a lot of services as they are low-income youth. However, they're not being served every single day of the week. So with our program going in and we work in their homes at their housing location and offer after-school programming, they can come to us when they aren't at Sun or at another after-school program. So they're getting tutoring in addition to all these other things almost every day of the week.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have other people? Okay, let's take 2 over here. Oh, we got 3 over here. So welcome. If you could just give us your name, organization if you wish, and you each have up to 3 minutes. And there's a clock right in front of you there. We'll start with you.
Am I on?
Is the green, touch the base of the microphone if the green light's on?
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm Janice Brown, and I'm the Executive Director of Portland Tennis and Education. And I don't have a handout for you, and I'm sorry.
All right.
This is my first time, and I'm really excited about this whole process. Nothing like government and work. But I felt that we scored low. You know, we're used to scoring higher, and we got a 39, so we're right at the bottom of the heap. And that's why we're here today, hopefully to bring some light into the work that we do at Portland Tennis and Education, which is really intensive academic work with underserved children from the neighborhood schools in the St. John's area. We were fortunate to secure a lease with the city to operate and use the St. John's Racket Center as our home base for our kids, and they would be happy to tell you that it's their house. So we've turned racquetball courts into academic classrooms. We have a walking bus that brings the children from their school to St. John's Racket Center. The interesting thing about our program is that the children who enrolled with us in 2009 are still with us today. So our ability to build family within the community has been one of the strongest components of our program. We know that low-income children suffer summer learning loss, so we have piled in 9 weeks of summer programming in addition to the time that they spend with us after school during the academic school year. So tennis and fitness are definitely a part of it. Health and nutrition are definitely a part of our program, but 60% of it is really based on academics and trying our very best, and so are the scholar athletes, as we call them, to bring their level of learning up to the point where it's exciting and fun to learn and to engage with other people and be a real part of the educational community. So, I have someone who came through the program.
Great, thank you. You just give us your name and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Nina Nguyen. Hello, committee members, and thank you for your time today. I am born and raised in Portland, Oregon, graduated from Oregon State University 3 years ago, and I currently serve as the Development Director for Portland Tennis and Education. So 2 weeks ago, I hit my first year as the Fund Development Director, and it's been great. But I'm here to tell my story and really convince you and let you know that this program really, truly works. In high school, I was very close to dropping out. Growing up in a single-family household and having a mother who's an immigrant from Vietnam, a lot of responsibilities fell on me, and a lot of times that took away my ability to focus on school. And when it became too much, I really couldn't think of any other way than to, stop my academics to really focus on helping my mom support the family, my brother and I. But then through my involvement in sports in high school, playing tennis for the very first time, I met my high school coach who then introduced me to Dennis Brown and Portland Tennis and Education. So I've been with the program since 2007 at various capacities. And so I've seen firsthand how well it works. And if I were to have been able to start the program as early as our scholar athletes do now, I know it would have made even more of an impact in my life than it already has. But it's a home, it's a family, it's a place where children can feel safe, it's a place where I feel safe, and it's a place that I can go to and know that I'm going to be taken care of and I'm going to get the support that I need. And we do that for our children, and I do that for the children now in my current capacity. And there's really no program like it that I've experienced.
Okay, thank you very much. Sir, you want to make sure your microphone, the green button there is on. There you go.
My name is Patrick Miller, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at Portland Tennis and Education. And I just want to echo the things that have already been said. I started at Portland Tennis and Education about 7 months ago in November. And initially I started as a temporary, just fill in for a month. And immediately I was caught up in how much of a family it really is in this space that they have created and that we continue to create. And I think what continues to motivate me is how we work with students, and you'll have a student come in after a hard day at school and they come to PT&E and it's a completely new day and they know exactly what to expect. We have a student to staff ratio of 6 to 1, and on top of that we have volunteers. So if they come in, they know that they're going to have time with an adult who cares about them, who's there to support them, and who has their best interest in mind. And I think I am not really a big tennis player at all, and so initially I was like, tennis? That's not something that appeals to me too much. But tennis is really just a vehicle, a hook to get the students interested, to teach them a new skill, and they can use tennis down the line. I mean, we have our kids on the weekends, they get to go to the MAC Club and play tennis with other students from the MAC Club. And it's not that often that you go from St. John's to the MAC Club and get to meet people and make these connections, and I think it's really valuable. And I've really enjoyed my time so far at PT&E, and I hope that the committee sees the value that we provide for the community, and thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Khalid, come on up. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
If you could just give us your name, and then you have up to 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Kali Thornlad. I'm Executive Director of Kairos PDX. And I just wanted to say a couple words about Kairos since we're a newer organization. It's our first time applying for children's levy funding. Our mission is around closing the achievement and opportunity gap, and we really have a vision around transformative education for children. The majority of children we serve are African American, and this proposal is really about STEM or STEAM and cultivating this next generation of STEAM leaders. We know that African Americans are the most underrepresented group in the STEM subjects, and we've been working on a project with Eco Northwest that shows growth in student achievement for African Americans actually declines over time. So early investment is really important. But we know that we can't do this alone, and so this year we've taken time to partner with other organizations that are experts more in the STEM field to come in and do work with our students, and it's been really exciting. I've invited one of those partners, Antonio, and his program, Building Blocks to Success, up to talk about that. But the only other thing I would say is Kairos is, even though we've been around only for 4 years, we're starting to get results. We use the MAP assessments through Northwest Evaluation Association to measure growth in literacy and math, and we're seeing that 63% of our students are exceeding growth targets. And so we have work to do, but we've been able to triple the number of students that are in the highest category in literacy development. We've decreased summer learning loss and actually see gains. 63% of our students grow in reading and 50% in math over the summertime. It's largely because we have a year-round program. And so we're excited about this opportunity to do really great stuff for children. So with that, I'll hand it over to Antonio.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello, committee. My name's Antonio Jackson. I'm the Executive Director for Building Blocks to Success. We're a local nonprofit working with Kairos, providing STEM programming to their students, K through 3rd grade. It's been exciting building the partnership with Kairos. The kids are very excited. We use Lego Robotics as our core program, and the kids, they really connect to Legos, so that's what really gets them and gets them excited because they know that. The robotics piece, they're learning that. It's a hands-on program where they're building, they're working in teams, they're being problem solvers, they're being critical thinkers and being analytical, and these are all foundational pieces for them to be successful in their academic pursuits. So Building Blocks to Success as an organization, we really focus on targeting youth of color. We have roughly about 70% of our kids are kids of color. 30% of our kids are girls that are getting excited about science, technology, engineering, and math. We also run a program out of our program, in addition to our programming, after-school programming at Kairos, we run it out of Concordia University. So we're setting the expectation for our kids that college is a reality and college is the expectation for them. Being in a higher education setting gives them that understanding that, yes, we can we can go to college, and it's not about if you're going to college, it's going to be about where you're going to college. So constantly reinforcing that. We're a culturally specific organization in that many of the same percentage of our students, around 70%, are people of color. So they're seeing people that look like them, that are in these professions as engineers and programmers and designers. So then they're able to set the expectation that I can be just like him because they see someone that's doing that. So we're just using STEM as a platform to inspire and motivate kids. And by having the relationship with Kairos and hopefully receiving funding to continue to grow this, I think we can impact the lives of more and more kids through STEM programming.
Great. Thank you.
So thank you.
Sir?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joel Cisneros, and I'm from Latino Network. I'm the director of school-based programs. And I just want to say that a year ago, when I started with the organization, I started going around and visiting all the principals. And it was evident that from day one, a lot of the concerns they were raising was around social-emotional learning, and a lot of the children having difficulty being engaged in the instructional time. So our proposal really pivots on that idea of really building on the evidence-based practice of Second Step and really using that fundamental evidence-based practice to really help develop those skills in the children. And so we're going to target Wriglers, Shaver, and Mill Park. At all those school sites, we have our Juntos Aprendemos program, which really becomes a nice suite of our programs and a nice continuum. So I just wanted to really emphasize the piece around social-emotional learning, and that our proposal really builds on that. And we'll be doing homework help and homework assistance that's age appropriate. But we truly believe that if we can foster those executive and functioning skills in children, that they will be able to be successful academically. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Anybody else testify? Okay, come on up. Welcome, and we'll start with you. If you can just give us your name and organization if you wish, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Grace Steele. I'm with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Portland. I'm the Director of Grants and Volunteer Management. Thank you for opening this process up and hearing feedback from everyone. And also thanks to all of the reviewers who went through all of the applications and were able to compare them all. Just in terms of trusting the process, I wanted to explicitly point out that Boys and Girls Clubs here on the orange sheet, the enrichment programs list, our Youth and Family Services program, we scored highly with the reviewers, and also for committee members showed preference for our program. And so just wanted to point that out. And the other side of that coin that I wanted to talk about today very briefly is that we are excited about our Youth and Family Service program, not only because it'll be in East Portland, serving low-income families with wraparound services, but because this is a program we're bringing back and bolstering, that we're prioritizing bolstering because our clients have asked for it, our families and our youth, and the staff who work directly with those families and youth. In the clubs, kids in K through 12 find a safe place to hang out after school and all summer long, where they can fight summer learning loss, be exposed to STEM careers, find caring adults that they might not otherwise in other parts of their life. But we also really think that youth and family voice is important, and so we are responsive in our programming to what our families and our staff tell us is working. And so that is part of the reason that we brought Youth and Family Services into this application round. And so I just wanted to mention that, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ida Lombardazzi. I'm the Director of Children's Programs at Friendly House in Northwest Portland. And I just wanted to speak a little bit and say you definitely have a tough job ahead of you. There's a lot of really fantastic, diverse group of applicants here. And I just wanted to speak a little bit about what stands out about Friendly House in this group. Looking through the list, I believe we're the only applicant in West Portland out of all these applicants. And I think when people think of West Portland, specifically Northwest Portland, they think of all the affluent families that live there, and that's certainly true. But I'd like to remind the Levy and the allocation committee that we do have several low-income housing units right in our neighborhood of Friendly House families that we serve. We serve in our after-school program, 30% of our students are from communities of color, which is a higher percentage of communities of color of students that attend Chapman Elementary, which is the school we serve. So, we have been in the neighborhood since 1930, and we are really dedicated to serving families in our neighborhood. We know in the history of our city that as housing has gotten more expensive, a lot of folks have been pushed out to East Portland and outer parts of Portland into Gresham because they can't afford to live there anymore. And we'd really like to keep Friendly House as a neighborhood service agency, as an after-school provider in our neighborhood so that the low-income families that are living there can still get those services. So I would just urge you to consider bumping us up further along the list, and I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Nate Golden, Director of REAP. Just happy to be here and just share about what we're doing as an organization as we expand on our Reflections program, which is already taking place in the Centennial School District, dealing with students around discipline issues and helping them make better decisions around discipline. So with this funding, we'll be able to expand more into our after-school programming to help students develop more leadership skills, helping them develop a climate survey to kind of be a voice around policy within their schools to where they're a major part of that process, and also being able to do things like this, going before city council, state capitol, elected officials, and just interface with those people and have a student voice around issues and things like that. So we kindly thank you for considering us, and we just thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Anybody else? Okay. Another couple?
Take one with the green light.
Yeah. Pick one with the
Green light's on.
Green light's on, that's good. Okay, go ahead, Peter.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for your time and consideration, especially since summer's on today and it might not be on tomorrow. So it's nice that you're inside a little bit, but there are a lot of them.
Give us your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm Pete Northrup, and I've never done this before, so it's all a little bit new, but I did learn about the green light, so going with that. You have a lot of important funding concerns to go through, and there are a lot of good organizations for children, especially now with the changes that are coming up with the budget from our federal government, et cetera, sort of a trickle down, so it becomes even more and more important. I wanted to talk a little bit about Portland Tennis and Education and talk about them in favor of whatever allocation you can do for them. They're in St. John's, and one of the things about Portland Tennis and Education is that tennis actually is quite a way down the list on what they're doing for these kids. So there are quite a few volunteers that help out, and the children have one parent that must attend as well. So there's a parental involvement, et cetera. And if you go to visit and watch them, they do play tennis, they do have exercise, they have good food, education is really critical to them, and they come up to you one by one, shake your hand, and say their name. So there's a lot of character development that goes on. When the Bryan twins were here, the tennis connection has some good national connection that they make out at St. John's. And when the Bryant twins were here for the Davis, I think it's the Davis Cup or US Open, I'm not a tennis player, but one of their comments was that one of the best things about Portland was the Portland Tennis and Education, because they saw it and they toured it, and it really helped out a lot. A lot of the kids have very difficult lives, parents that are incarcerated, just sort of a troubled group. And at PT&E, the nice thing about them, you've heard a little bit about it, but there is this feeling that they can come there, they're safe, they all participate. It's to watch it and watch the teachers and how the kids respond to the teachers. You know, they have food, they have protection, they have friends, and it's really quite amazing. So anyway, thank you for the consideration, and happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll go to you next, sir.
Hello. I'm waiting for my green here. There we are.
There you go.
My name's Kerry Clark, and I'm the Executive Director of Young Audiences of Oregon and Southwest Washington. And I just wanted to say thank you to the committee and to the staff of the Children's Levy for running such a transparent process. It's been a wonderful opportunity for Young Audiences, which is a nearly 60-year-old organization that serves 70,000 students throughout our region in about 200 schools every year, to move in a direction that we've been looking for the resources to do it potentially. We've had a wonderful conversation with our partners at IRCO and have been looking to really bring the creative learning services that we're able to offer through the best teaching artists in our community to serve students that they're working with in their son's schools. And this funding would give us that opportunity and enable us to serve populations that we've been looking for opportunities to be able to serve. So it's very exciting for us. And I also just wanted to acknowledge the company in the room. It's a really inspiring group of people. So thanks for allowing us to be part of that. And thank you for reviewing our application. We hope to be able to inspire young people and expand their learning through the arts. And we hope to be able to do that at 6 new after-school sites in East Portland with your support.
Great. Thank you. Ma'am?
No, green on.
Green on. Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
So my name is Leah Altman, formerly Leah Gibson. I've appeared in front of you guys a couple of times as an at-risk youth throughout the years for a couple of different organizations. I'm now the development manager at Pathfinders of Oregon, and I want to respectfully apologize that we jumped the gun earlier. And I just wanted to add a few additional things about our program, just as a concerned community member and also as somebody who does have family in the criminal justice system and so therefore has some experience personally. And I just wanted to add a couple of things that we forgot to mention earlier, which is one is that we are going through a really intensive equity assessment in order to become more culturally responsive. And we plan to work with the Coalition of Communities of Color to go through their organizational assessment and then hopefully enlist the support of the Center for Inclusion and Diversity, I think it's called, or Diversity and Inclusion, to help us through that process to hopefully begin serving from a more culturally responsive place beginning in January. We also want to, or we have also recently completed an assessment to incorporate trauma-informed practice into the work that we do with the kids that we serve and all across the organization. We additionally, on top of that, the parenting classes that we're hoping to do with this program, with the after-school program, normally we do that at the Center for Family Success, but we realize that there's a real need to go to where the families are. So we would be serving parents at the schools where their kids would be at. And offering free childcare. I think that's something that we kind of skipped over earlier. So it's really trying to approach serving youth of incarcerated parents or recently incarcerated parents from a really holistic and wraparound service component to our regular programming. And then another thing that I just wanted to add, because I'm a relatively new staff member and I've worked for numerous nonprofit organizations throughout the years, something that I just really appreciate about Pathfinders is that the people who work for Pathfinders, the staff, really represent the community that we serve out in East Portland. They mentioned before that we have about 90% children of color, and the majority of the children that we serve are low income, close to 100%. And a lot of our staff come from that same position, and they have a lot of lived experience as parents or as children of incarcerated parents. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you all for your testimony, and now it's up to this committee to decide which applicants we want to invite to do full-blown requests for information. We've already tipped our hands a little bit in terms of the where we fall in terms of the number of committee members who support various programs.
Do you want to start with the intensive academic or enrichment?
Why don't we start with the intensive academic?
Okay.
Can I offer one point of clarification just around it, because we did take up this issue around the school, whether it's inside or outside the city boundaries, and I think to Chair Kafori's point, the address, I think probably the mailing address for Wilkes says Portland, Oregon, but it technically sits outside the boundary. And so, because we have a map that the city provides with the actual boundaries with the streets, so we check those for all applicants just to make sure to see what the situation is. So if you're going to go forward doing it, that's fine, but I think we just have to make sure that you've set some expectation that we will check for where youth are coming from who are participating in the program.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Dan, before we get started, can I just again ask another clarifying question on the money?
Mitch, I'm sorry, you're quiet. Is your light on? Okay, that's right.
Okay.
Sorry.
I wanted to ask a clarifying question on the money. We've got reviewer recommendations for both categories, and they sum total up to amount requested. We just modified the amount request, or the amount in play today. So I think it'd just be good for me anyway to just do a quick review on how much money do we have in each bucket, and what does that mean in terms of looking at these proposals and the numbers of proposals?
Sure. In the intensive academic bucket, you have a total of $320,000. And so depending on the amount of money requested, you can fund, let me back up. We require that we fund grants that are a minimum of $50,000 a year. So depending on the amount of money requested by an applicant, you could fund 3 to 4 grants in this category. Probably more like 3. And then for enrichment, there was a total of $480,000. And so again, depending on the amount of money requested, 4 to 5 applications.
And one further clarifying point, you don't always fund what people request.
Right. Yeah.
But in the past, people.
Sometimes you award
you
less
fund
than what
less.
they requested.
And so just to follow up again, this is a new method. So are we trying to whittle it down to the programs that we want to fund, or are we, do we want to whittle it down to a number larger than the programs we think we're going to fund, and then pick of the finalists the ones we want to fund?
Our understanding in designing the process originally was that you were aiming for option B, that you were using this process as a method for sort of starting to narrow the field, but that the number of applicants you would invite forward would exceed the number you would ultimately probably fund. But if you're asking the question among your board members, that's another, I'm answering what we thought you all discussed.
Well, that's helpful. Yeah, I just wanted to get a line before we got going on this.
I think ultimately it's up to you.
That's why I asked.
Keeping in mind that we need to have enough reviewers to review these applications. So in terms of the total number that we're looking toward that to some degree.
I think, I think it would be helpful, I would imagine, for us to suggest a broad enough number so that we know that when the full applications come back, that we have some room to make some other discerning among them, and yet really try to pare it down somewhat today. And so under the intensive academic, what seems to make sense to me would be to request full proposals from those programs that had a score of 45.5 or more.
Knowing that the Boys and Girls Club withdrew their application. So
Yes,
Julie, by
yes.
your suggestion, that's
Right.
5 applicants.
That is right, that is
Okay.
correct. And I think we will probably arrive at choosing 3 that we have for the 320,000. So I think that's a good number.
Okay.
Oh,
Others
I'm sorry,
want-
what was which were the ones then?
Go ahead, Julie, if you want.
Well, and that's assuming that we're still comfortable with accepting an opportunity to fund El Programa Hispano Católico. So it would be that one, Latino Network, Boys and Girls Clubs, REAP.
Not Boys and Girls
Not
Clubs.
Boys and Girls, I'm sorry, REAP and Impact Northwest and Metropolitan Family Service Experience Corps.
Just to that, again, to be fair, since a couple years ago, we threw out Human Solutions application because the school that they wanted was not in the city limits. I think we should stay with what we had done previously when it comes to schools being out of the city limits. And so with that, and don't get me wrong, I love El Programa, have always been a fan of that program, but to be fair, I just think because of the school that you're serving is out of the city limits that it wouldn't qualify if we're staying with what we've done in the past.
Well, I think there might be a case to be made, and I think because if they serve students who live in the city of Portland, even though the school itself is not within the city of Portland limits, there's probably a case to be made, and I guess.
At the time, so was Human Solutions, and we said no.
Really?
Yeah.
Better memory than I do.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting conversation, and it begs the bigger question, which is whether we should have a county-wide children's levy, since we've had so much gentrification and people moving out of the city limits. But I think at this point, we need to follow the rules that we've put in place for this measure. And we have a lot of really fabulous applications. And again, while I also agree that El Programa is, we're big fans of El Programa, I think that to be fair to prior conversations and the way things go, we should, prior organizations.
Okay.
So when did we review Human Solutions and make that decision? And was it based on our reading of the levy, or was it a policy choice that the allocation committee made?
In the past, I don't remember the specific, and I'll defer to Meg.
I also don't remember
because
exactly
my memory
which
is,
application.
I'm old now, my memory's not what it used to be. I don't remember specifically remember
was
that.
executive director at that time, and so.
I'm not, I just don't know when, I don't know when it occurred. Do you remember when it was? Was it
When I
2014?
first came on, I think, yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah, could have been 2014, could have been before, because I think you were actually here before that. But in general, the policy has been, particularly with school-based services, is to not entertain applications for schools that were outside the city of Portland, with the exception, I think, of that bridge funding we did for Davis one year.
And that was in like
That was-
07 or
yeah,
06.
It was long ago.
I want to also add just a point, Mitch, of information. There have been times when we have been in a competitive funding process that an applicant has called and asked us a question about citing for after-school programs in which schools, and we're thinking about this school or that school, and we have at that time said the policy has been not to fund sites that are outside of the city boundary. So there have been applications that have come forward that maybe would have previously included a site like the position that Wilkes is in now, but that didn't because they consulted staff, and our RFI have always been published with the beneficiaries of the services being city residents, or for the after-school program and being school sites located in the city. My point being, there have been times when applicants maybe would have come forward including sites that were outside of the city had they known we would bend that rule. So just as a point of information, I'm not.
So does the RFI say that for after-school, it's not an either-or, it's a resident, serve a resident unless you're a school site, and then you have to have the school site inside the city limits?
The RFI did not state that. It said it needs to be residents, it needs to be serve children who are either residents of the city of Portland or go to school in the city of Portland. So that's what it said. It didn't say that, it didn't specifically say that the school had to be in here. So, we've developed several policies that help people deal with real-life situations, as I believe the person who testified for El Programa said, people do move. And so if we allow people to continue serving somebody, even if they move, if at the time of enrollment they were living in the city of Portland, and then they move midway through the service or through the year or whatever the time of service is, we allow the agency to keep serving the person with the idea that they were a city of resident when they first came into the service. So we try to create rules that we think are reasonable. With after-school programs in particular, because of the way kids come into programs, it's more difficult for people to screen out kids who don't live in the city, because I hear her point that they're the sun provider there, and so they have access to information about addresses of kids who are participating. But that's the level of information you need to know whether someone lives in the boundaries or doesn't.
Yeah, so I guess from my perspective, it's a policy choice. It's not a legal requirement from our
The city attorney.
measure. Well, if it is, if you're confused, what I would propose in this instance, because I'm persuaded that a border school serving Portland residents should not be excluded, that I would at least like to keep them on the list, give them a chance to submit and see if they can persuade us that they could properly screen and only serve Portland residents. And at the same time, we could find out if it's truly a policy decision that the committee has made, or it's a legal requirement. If it's a legal requirement, obviously, we wouldn't be able to do it. But I would, to me, it feels like a policy of exclusion that I don't feel, at least hearing everybody's arguments, is very persuasive to me.
But then we're not being consistent in what we've been doing in our.
Very true. That's very true.
We haven't been consistent. And then again, some others would have probably have applied if they knew that we were going to be doing that. And so I just don't think it's fair at this point. And maybe going forward, when we get ready to start new funding, we can make some policy changes then. I think consistency, when we're doing this type of work, it's really valuable. Because people look to us for that leadership and for consistency within our policies, so.
Okay. So Julie, you told us you supported organizations that scored 45.5 and above
Correct.
in the intensive academic.
That I would invite those organizations to resubmit. In terms of the conversation that we're having around a school that resides outside the district, I think it is one, it would be helpful to know technically, legally, even if perhaps it changes what we've been doing in the past, or would say we probably were wrong. I guess I'm being sensitive to that you could have City of Portland residents paying taxes that should entitle their child to receive services, and at the same time, their neighborhood school is not in the city. How does that sort out? And that we, I think, have to consider that this is the public's money and the taxpayers' money, and if there's a way that we can serve a taxpayer's child, we at least have to find out where that responsibility lies. And I'm no attorney.
I think it's a great conversation going forward, but a lot of kids families who pay taxes, kids aren't getting served too as well. So it can be an even bigger argument. But as Chair Kafori said, I think it's a great conversation going forward, and do we do it countywide or do we do it citywide? So.
Okay.
So I think, to Mitch's point, I think we have time to find that out and accept an additional, this is additional work also for El Programa to go ahead and make that choice if they want to submit a full application at the same time, that we would get more information.
So at this point, there's no motion. There's Julie's suggestion about taking all of the applicants that scored a 45.5 or higher to invite back.
My recommendation.
And Mitch's proposal not to eliminate El Programa on account of the citing.
My recommendation would be to to ask them all, because since it's a short list.
When you say ask them all, do you mean all?
The ones that
scored lower?
Yes. Because it would be only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would only be 5 programs.
Sorry. Will you walk me through which 5? Because I think it's more than that, Serena. The only one that's not eligible because they withdrew their application is Boys and Girls Clubs.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
There's 7 programs
Right.
that
Even the
are
ones
still
that
on the
scored,
list.
all the ones that Friendly House, Metropolitan, Impact Northwest, REAP, and Latino Network.
And El Programa?
Well,
I'm still.
well,
Okay, so you're, I want to
we
clarify.
went what Miss just, it would include El Programa. So it
Okay.
just depends on how we're going to go.
So I'll throw out a totally different alternative. I would propose that we do fewer numbers since we're asking people to fund, we're not going to fund all of these. We don't have the money. And the whole point of this was to narrow the scope. That's why we were doing. I would say that we cut it off just do the, I'll stick to, I guess, what was Julie's original?
45.5.
45.5. And I would say, I would ask El Programa to talk, I mean, if we're going to ask them to put something forward, they're going to have to talk about how they're going to do equity. Because if you have two kids who've been best friends since they were in kindergarten and now they want to go into an after-school program together and one lives on one side of the street and one lives on the other, and you're going to say no to, personally, I would say, I'm sorry to them, but I appreciate that other people are interested in funding them. So I think they would have to address all those, that type of inequity issue within their application as well.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess I didn't have a chance to look at the map, what percentage of kids in this school potentially do live in Portland, if it's a
Sure.
small percentage, if.
That information wasn't in the application, and I don't
Yeah.
think it was clear
We
to us.
normally do ask for the demographics variables on the population served in the RFI stage, so people do fill out something. I mean, people have to keep in mind that, we use zip codes as a guideline. Zip codes are not perfect because there are zip codes that we do that include the city of Portland, but also include places that are not in the city of Portland. So a zip code is only the rough estimate. So, we do our best with people to try to get people to screen as best they can using the addresses to make sure they're serving residents of the city without causing them to spend all of their time only thinking about that. So, we're trying to work with people on that because remember, people do move. And so this is something that people have to track. So yes, I think we can do any number of what you suggested. We can ask for a legal opinion. We can see what sorts of assurances the applicant can offer.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready for a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Julie?
I move that we ask, under the intensive academic, that we ask the organizations, including El Programa, that scored 45.5 and higher to submit a full application.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I would just like to say that I remain troubled about Friendly House. We have, the city has supported and subsidized low-income housing units being placed in many of the towers in the Pearl and throughout that region. And if the families with qualifying income move into those units and there's no available daycare, it truly presents a challenge. So while I am in favor of this motion, I want to keep examining that. I also wanted to say that it sounds like the Portland Tennyson Education Foundation is serving kids in a culturally specific way in a neighborhood that has been underserved. And I would hope that maybe next time they come back with an application that's a little more on target, because it sounds like they have everything that we want. And maybe, I heard it was your first time, and so maybe the second time you'll be able to present it in a way that gets the score up, and we're able to support both of those programs next time through.
I would like to add, too, that I am a little heartened by Friendly House. As I was over in that neighborhood the other day, and to see all the kids that are in that neighborhood, I think sometimes we tend to forget about Northwest Portland and all the low-income housing that has been placed over in that area. And that's just something I think that we should keep in mind, that all kids need service, truly. And so I would echo that part, what you're stating.
I would just say that I do think we've hit on a gray area here about maybe our policy precedents and being consistent about funding school-based programs that may serve kids that do not live in the district, or do not live in the city, excuse me. But I am going to support asking El Programa to, basically take the burden of proof challenge and show us that they can do it, given the fact that they also operate the Sun School. But we will also solicit the appropriate legal policy reviews just to find out where we've been in the past and if there's any hard legal constraints about where we should be on this. And we'll have time to factor all that in prior to our final decisions on July 24th. And I also just wanted to say that I recuse myself from voting on Impact Northwest proposal because of a perceived conflict of interest. So if that could just be recorded in the minutes. And if there's no further discussion, I'll ask all in favor of the proposal, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. It's passed, one no, and I guess I should be an abstention. I guess I should be listed as an abstention, to be fair. Okay, let's move on to the next category, our last category, which is the enrichment category, where we have $480,000 to invest, and we have more applicants.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I move that we ask everyone who has a score of 46 or above to submit an application.
I second that.
46, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, moved and seconded to request applications from all organizations that scored 46 and above, which would include Young Audiences, Boys and Girls Club, Community Cycling Center, Bravo Youth Orchestra, Human Solutions, Pathfinders of Oregon, and Kairos PDX. Did you get that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Any further discussion? Okay. And then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Oh, that was easy.
That's quick. That part was easier. Okay, so I think the only matter of business remaining is to actually approve the actual form of the document, the request for information that we're going to send to these.
Since we didn't have time to run that by you, I wanted to give you an opportunity to offer any suggestions. This is not really different than our last RFI. We have not substantively changed the questions that we're asking. We have just modified the text to accord with the fact this is an invited request rather than a general request like we would be putting out typically. And also, we didn't do all of the sort of preamble that was, around public input, et cetera, regarding the strategies, et cetera, the development of the strategies, all the history essentially that went before the last round, that was taken out. But the questions that the applicants need to respond to are pretty much the same. It's been very little revision. So I just wanted to make sure everyone had if there's any opportunity to say anything one way or the other, that you
Anybody have any
have the
concerns?
chance to say it. Go ahead.
Would you remind me whether the information we asked for helps us identify whether the folks providing direct services to youth are identified by ethnicity or race?
We have a form that each organization has to fill out. It's not attached to this because that's one of the attachments to the application. There's like 10 of them, so we didn't put those on there. But yes, they fill out, that puts the race and ethnicity of their whole organization, basically board staff and management staff and direct staff both. So,
But as it relates to the particular program we'd be funding?
Yes, the column includes the proposed population and then the direct service staff, management staff, and the board.
exactly, so you can see all levels.
Okay, so I sense we're okay with the request for investment form.
Okay.
Yep, okay. So that
If
does
you have a
complete
second
our
thought,
business.
let me know quickly.
Okay.
Can I have just one quick thing? I just wanted to say, to commend the staff. This is the most beautiful
Mary
The best one.
The rest of us
annual
had nothing to
community
do with it.
report ever. It's especially right now with so much negativity and, going on around our country, to see all of these smiling faces with these flowers, this made my day. Thank you.
Hey, Mary Gay.
Good job, Mary Gay.
Very good.
Well, and I just want to say before we adjourn, I want to invite people to come down to the City Hall atrium downstairs.
Yeah.
There's treats, and you can actually see some exhibits, art exhibits, and more about our annual report, and the 2017 community report. Our next allocation committee meeting will be Monday, July 24th at 2:30 PM in City Hall Council Chambers. and the agendas will be posted on the Levy website and sent to our database. So please, if you can, go downstairs and enjoy the exhibit, and we stand adjourned.
Thank you.